Okay, so this could potentially be the last video that you guys have. I'm not going to make any promises, but I think it is. So today we're focusing on three things: aggression, attraction, and altruism. So we're going to talk briefly about aggression. While I go through this, I will show you my amazing little video here to the right. This is Jack and our fabulous little neighbor, Ella, and you need to watch all the way to the end because they're best friends at the beginning, and then it doesn't end very well. And that just happened. So, aggression, what causes that to happen? Well, it could be a variety of things. It could be genetic, obviously. We hope that it's not a genetic. Jack did not inherit the aggressive gene. It could be that he is trying to seek excitement. It could be testosterone. It could be, hopefully not, a neurological disorder or brain tumor. Alcohol abuse. I would hope a 1.5-year-old is not abusing alcohol. But more likely is other influences that can also just add to aggression. And these are probably things that more so impact you all on a daily basis or on a regular basis. And this is where when you become frustrated, and when you're frustrated, you become angry. Scapegoating, if you're upset about something and you get angry with somebody else. Personal space, which is what is probably happening in this picture. An invasion of personal space, too close for comfort. Crowded, if you're ever on the metro and it's super, super crowded. Or when you're hot, that can also cause it. Some interesting research, though, that goes along with this, and this is really more than anything what I want to focus on, is research on pornography and violent video games. So essentially what we've found is when it comes to pornography and aggression, what happens is for people that have watched a lot of pornography or has watched aggressive pornography, what we tend to see is more of an acceptance. So people, when they watch a lot of pornography or watch pornography with aggression where the victim then enjoys it or finds it pleasurable, we tend to see those individuals be more accepting of aggressive relationships or aggression in relationships. And as far as violent video games are concerned, does violence in video games cause violence? Not necessarily. People can play lots of violent video games and never be violent people. However, what we do see is that they can view the world as a more hostile place, and they lose sensitivity to violence. So they're not as sensitive to violence. In some people, it can cause them to become more aggressive and more violent. But overall, it's not necessarily a causation. What we do find, though, is that virtual reality, when people are playing virtual reality games that are violent, that can increase aggressive feelings and behaviors. So there's something about the reality aspect of it that can increase that. Attraction. Why are you attracted to somebody? Well, the first reason is proximity. Either they're physically close to you or geographically close to you. So that can increase their attractiveness. Mere exposure, if you see them repeatedly. Reciprocity, people who tend to think like us. Somebody who's in the same age range. Gender usually influences our attractiveness. Race and socioeconomic class. Physical attractiveness, this is something that's kind of interesting, is 6-month babies will look at attractive pictures for a longer period of time than people deemed quote-unquote unattractive. What makes somebody attractive is symmetrical faces and bodies. So symmetry has a lot to do with attractiveness. What we found, Langlios did a study and found that males and females across many cultures do have similar ideas about what's attractive and what's not. And we have what's called the halo effect. And the halo effect says that what we tend to do is when someone is attractive, we tend to attribute other positive factors with them or favorable qualities. So somebody who's attractive, you might say, oh, they're also so nice, or oh, they're, so generous. And maybe they're not more so than anyone else, but because they're attractive, we tend to attribute that to them. Opposites don't always attract. Yes, you may be attracted to somebody who has very opposites to you, but overall, opposites do not tend to attract. And that's because of the matching hypothesis, where you tend to be attracted to people who are similar to yourself. Love. There are two kinds of love. The first is passionate, the second is companionate. Think of passionate as first, companionate as second. Passionate is that very intense sexual attraction that you have at the beginning of a relationship. That does not last. Sorry, hate to break it to you. It's just the reality of it. Does that mean that passion goes away? No, but passionate love typically does. You can attribute passionate love to the two-factor theory. Two-factor theory says that you have a physical arousal or a physical sensation and a cognitive appraisal, and that's what leads to the emotion. And so if you think about passionate love, you obviously have some physical arousal, and that's going to lead to a cognitive appraisal of, oh, I love this person, or I like this person, or I care about this person, which then leads to the feeling of love or liking. Arousal from any source can enhance one emotion or another. So when we think about a sexual arousal can enhance the feeling of love. Passionate love does eventually fall away, and that leads to companionate love. So this is how you know if it's meant to be, or if it's going to be a longer lasting relationship. And this is when you have a deep affectionate attachment. This is when the passionate love has ended. You want a partner that has compatible backgrounds and interests. And this is why we say that opposites don't always attract, is because it's hard with companionate love to have somebody with opposites. So how is it that you get your love to last? Well, first, equity. You have to have equity in the relationship, however that looks for you. It doesn't necessarily mean that everything is split evenly down the middle, but there has to be some sort of equity within the relationship. And two, self-disclosure. There has to be an openness within the relationship. Doesn't mean you share every single detail, but it does mean that you have an open relationship and you talk freely with one another. Totally switching gears here to altruism. And what this is talking about is really, how do we interact and help others when the need arises? This idea of pro-social behavior, helping other people, we tend to see it early in life with little kids wanting to help out a lot when they're really little. And that's a good thing to encourage that pro-social behavior. Altruism is this idea of empathy for others, so understanding what others are going through and wanting to help them. But when we decide whether or not we're going to help them, we go through what we call a social exchange theory. That is, does the reward of helping this person outweigh the cost of helping this person? So if there's somebody in help, I might be thinking of whether or not me helping them is really worth it. Social responsibility norms, cultures do vary differently on whether or not you help out others. In the United States, typically we are willing to help family, friends, and strangers if they're in a life-threatening circumstance. But we only help family in moderately serious situations. We also tend to follow reciprocity, where we help those who tend to help us. Now, something interesting with this was this woman up here on the right-hand side, Kitty Genovese. And what happened to Kitty is she was raped and murdered outside of her apartment in New York City. And she was stabbed multiple times. And the interesting things about this was that, so she was stabbed, the attacker left, then came back, raped her, and stabbed her again. During this time period, she screamed out, begging for help. When interviewed later, the neighbors said that they heard her screaming out for help, but yet nobody called the police for 30 minutes, giving the attacker enough time to attack her, leave, come back, finish raping her, and killing her. Why did this happen? Well, Darley and Latan showed that the more people a participant believed were present during emergency, the longer it took the participant to respond and help a person in distress. This is why if you go through first aid or CPR training, they tell you to point to someone directly and say, "You in the purple shirt, call 911. The reason for that is because it eliminates the bystander effect. If you just yell out, "Call 911, if there's other people around, other people are going to think somebody else is doing it and they won't call. It's called the diffusion of responsibility. So if you are dying or there's an emergency, it's better to have one person around you than a bunch of people around you because you're more likely to get help faster if there's only one or two people. Conflict and peace. The social trap is this idea that we put our own interests before those of a group. So, for example, recycling, right? I try to be really good about it. Every once in a while, I'm just bad about it. And I'm like, oh, it's just one or two times because I'm being lazy. And so I'm putting my own interests in front of the interests of a group. How can we eliminate that? Or how can we make that happen less frequently? Well, we can create regulations. We can have better communication about what we need to do. And the awareness of our responsibilities. So if I am more aware that the garbage that I throw in the garbage instead of recycling ends up in their oceans, and maybe I'll be more willing to be better about it. For the second part of this, when we talk about conflicts, I want you to think about the Cold War. So the tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union. I think some of you in history class are probably getting close to this. The reason why I want you to think of this is because it's a great job of how conflict develops. This idea of mirror image perceptions. If you were to look at how we viewed the Soviets and how the Soviets viewed us during the Cold War, they were mirror images of each other. We're both evil. We're both, selfish, wanting power, trying to control the other. And that essentially is what led us to our own self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So we end up doing things and taking actions that allowed the other side to believe that we really were like this. So we essentially set up ourselves in that conflict. How do you eliminate that? Well, you can eliminate it in a couple of ways, but the best way is to have a subordinate goal, right? Shared goals that override differences and can only be achieved by working together. So during the Cold War, coming up with assault treaties, like how can we disarm these nuclear warheads, especially after the Cuban Missile Crisis, when we had essentially nuclear warheads pointed at one another? How is it that we can ensure the race of mankind, or ensuring the race or the mankind can live prosperous lives? And that could be this idea of, okay, well, we need to eliminate nuclear warheads, or we need to figure out a way to live with nuclear warheads. And so we're coming up with a SALT treaty. Another way to do it would be GRIT, the Graduated and Reciprocated Initiatives in Tension Reduction. And this is one way to reduce international tensions. We saw Kennedy do this when he stopped atmospheric testing of nuclear warheads. So in an effort to end this nuclear war race, he's like, you know what, I'm going to take the first step by stopping my testing, atmospheric testing of them, and maybe then the Soviets will take a step as well.